morning, everyone. So my name is Leslie Sanchez, and I will be doing my presentation on juvenile probation officer. So before we start, I would like to define the terms probation and juvenile delinquency. Probation is a disposition that is used nationwide when adjudicating juvenile delinquent cases. Probation is a mechanism that is used in the juvenile justice system at many different points of the case and in the system when it comes to serving a sanction for juvenile adjudication in court. Juvenile delinquency all is a minor, and the minor's age depends on the state, and basically the delinquent acts fall into two categories. The first type of delinquent act is one to be considered an adult crime. An example would be a serious felony or misdemeanor. An example of those would be murder, robbery, or aggravated assault. The second type of delinquent act would be known as a status offender. A status offender example would be truancy, vandalism, or passing curfew. So I had the opportunity to interview someone from the Los Angeles County Probation Offices, and their mission statement, goals, and values state. Mission statement states, enhance public safety, ensure victim rights, and effect positive probation and behavioral changes. Their goals state, rebuild lives and provide for healthier and safer communities. Their values state, dignity and respect for clients, public employees, integrity to do the right things for all the right reasons at all the right times. So I had the opportunity to interview Deputy Probation Officer Wilbur Alvarado and the Los Angeles County Probation Offices. Currently, Officer Wilbur Alvarado is in the investigations unit in the probation offices. But prior to being an investigation unit, he was a juvenile probation officer for 10 years. He did 5 years working in juvenile camps. Camps would be like jail or like anything that like you see in movies that are like very isolated areas. And he did another 5 years working in detention centers, which makes it a 10 years total. Deputy Probation Officer basically supervises youths who are either on probation, parole, or in jail and prison, and he works with their families to access and ensure that they are going in compliance with their court terms. He provides counseling, he provides a junior cadet program, youth mentoring program, therapy to the offender in an attempt to change and eliminate behavioral issues. So, Deputy Probation Officer Alvarado basically helped to rehabilitate youth offenders and lower criminal activities. He is proud of his workings with juveniles and feels like he offers what he calls prison without the walls. He basically improves moral characters within juveniles, and he feels like he's breaking social barriers with friends, families, and society. His job basically is a prevention for juveniles who prevent them from going into criminal activity and criminal behaviors, and he wants to help them with resources to help them rehabilitate. So basically this class is related to what we're going through right now in the course, since a juvenile probation officer has so many duties and roles and powers. He may be involved before anything occurs. Like sometimes these people are not only referred as probation officers, they're also being referred as correctional treatment specialists because they work exclusively with adolescents who have been convicted of a crime or are being convicted of a crime or serving time of a crime, and they are basically put in probation, and probation could be within a jail or prison or could be in a detention center. And they basically are not, instead of being sentenced, or sometimes they are sentenced, they basically serve the time outside of a jail. And basically a juvenile probation officer works with underage individuals who have already served time in jail or serving time in jail or preventing from serving time in jail. They basically are tools that are brought in the broader aspect because a juvenile may basically be violating certain things, and they're offered to do probation, and this helps them a lot. So Um, Basically, they are in charge of supervising youths who have either been or parole or probation for committing a crime. Juvenile probation officers meet with adolescents and their family, like we said, and they basically just offer this type of rehabilitation that's being placed outside so they can still live a normal life. So there are two type of theories that I applied, I believe, that are related to a juvenile probation officer. One would be the social learning theory because it stresses the importance of learning through models like, an idol or something like that. And sometimes those idols are criminals or they are portraying criminal activities and behaviors, and this is a function that basically of copying or learning criminal conduct from others. The same monkey see and monkey do could be a great example of the social learning theory. Sometimes children and adolescents grow up in a rural and very poor area where violence, drug abuse, prostitution are placed in the public eyes, and this is what they see on the daily basis, and they adhere and they imply that, sometimes poor parental, poor modeling, poor any type of area basically emphasizes the probable cause of poor adolescent adjustment and poor adolescent delinquent behavior. Another theory is the enemy theory of delinquency, which basically stresses down the social restraints on individual conducts, and although sometimes we may have lower socioeconomic statuses, we may have adopted goals from middle class or higher class goals and aspirations that we may be unable to portray, since sometimes individuals have economic and critical and cultural circumstances. An example of this would be sometimes a juvenile or a young offender has so many goals, but yet they cannot happen due to their economic background and their cultural aspects. And so due to that, they want to portray certain delinquent behaviors, like, sometimes students cannot be or cannot act a certain way due to their, society. And because of that, they begin to show delinquent behaviors, and they're basically, it's all bad. Like, it shows like they do have goals, but they cannot show those goals because of society and the way they portray themselves and the way society accepts us due to our social economic background, financial background, economical background, like all the above. Due to that, like, that's why a lot of us are not accepted. So all of this basically shows how probation officers and our course correlate with each other, because a juvenile probation officer basically tries to prevent certain crimes and tries to adhere and like show us that, family, friends, society, social media, they all perform some sort of they just basically show positive and negative aspects. Both the social learning theory and anatomy theory are examples of how this correlates to our class, because juvenile probation officers are responsible for making regular visits either to detention centers or to camps or going to youth homes to make sure that they aren't complied with any type of juvenile behavior. And so this basically shows us that, the juvenile probation officer has so many duties to withhold, with case working papers, meeting with juveniles, and sometimes those juveniles are very verbally abusive, physically abusive, and mentally abused, and it's very hard. One needs to have so many patience and time and stuff with these juveniles. Like, sometimes we need to understand that probation is widely used in juvenile courts due to the violation of a criminal, or sometimes it's imposed for them. And, it's something that we should pay attention to more. And overall, this has taught me that what I've learned from this experience is that this job is very tough, and it's an amazing job that I believe I found my interest in. One can learn so much experience from a probation officer and so much more, since they work so closely with adolescents and young offenders. they are like a prevention program, and sometimes they are the ones that help juveniles more than family, friends, and society. So I really want to give these two questions to my classmates to leave them with. So how should we, as a society, treat juveniles who have changed their lives and came out of incarceration or detention centers or camps? How should we treat them? The second question is, how should we prevent juvenile delinquency, and how should we become advocates in this type of situation? So I want to give out a special thank you to the LA County Probation Offices and Deputy Probation Officer Wilbur Alvarado for his time and consideration, and to thank all the probation officers that are all around the world. Thank you.